All right, looks like we are recorded. All right. So anyone who decided to click on this video, I'm just gonna sit here and talk to Joe Pedulla. He's a strength coach at Oklahoma. He's someone that I followed for a while. I've probably followed you for like a little less than a year, maybe more than a year. I don't know.
Yeah,
One,
I came across your stuff about a year ago, a little longer than that. So
yeah, the one post that I want to talk to you about to get started is the one that like really brought me to your page. This was a post, it says July 28th, but I feel like I followed you longer than that. So anyways, for the people who are part of this audience, go follow Joe on Instagram. It's Pedulla Performance. Just has good takes. His audience, you'd say most of your audience is like younger coaches.
yeah, if I can go on a little like segue really quick with my
Yeah.
audiences, and you're a business owner yourself, so a lot of coaches follow you. So I'll just speak really quick on this. But for years, my content has been educational. Like I feel like I'm a teacher by heart, and like I really enjoy the educational aspect. So I've released products like programs and things like that, and I wasn't really like hitting home to my audience, and I felt like I wasn't really hitting a stride until I started truly speaking to like what my audience wanted and who my audience was. Like I thought it was athletes and I thought it was people that wanted to just develop athletically, but then I started to like really dive deep down and like 90% of my following is interns, GAs, coaches, and even sport coaches who come seeking like educational content. So that's why I released my course this summer and that did better because I felt like that spoke to the need of the audience. So like definitely young coaches. I do a lot of phone calls with interns, GAs that are looking for their next opportunity. So that's yeah. I just a little side note for people that run a business, look at who your audience is and try to solve their problem. And we're going to talk more about like solving that problem for your actual employers and how that helps your job search, but not to cut you off there, but I thought that would be worthy of mentioning.
Did you get data on that? Like you actually got data that was 90% of your audience was that population?
That,
Or is
that
that like a
that's
guess?
not It's a guess. I'm just
Oh,
estimating. For sure, it's definitely mostly coaches, without a
okay.
doubt.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's just get into this. Okay, so this is a post on Instagram that I saved when I saw it. I'm just gonna summarize it and then I'm gonna have you elaborate. And I just think it's something that I've talked about so much in the past year. So quickly, you had a performance review. Um, they said you scored lowest in this performance review in the score of empathy.
Right.
And basically you have these points where you say like nobody actually defends regurgitated claims. Why should we accept positions that are poor positions just to be empathetic? You should be able to defend. They called you defensive in the performance review if I read it right. And it's like I'm just going to let you go on a tangent here, but it's something that I've noticed a ton in strength conditioning is that like people want to be considered open-minded so much that like their head falls out of their brain falls out of their head. And it's like, yeah, of course, be open-minded to the point where if somebody makes a compelling case, you're gonna be open-minded towards that case. But like I've seen people flip-flop on positions so much, or maybe not even authentically flip-flop on positions, but they like are this chameleon where they pretend to believe a certain position because it aligns with a coach that they want to have a good relationship with. And it's like it's just so inauthentic to me. So yeah, floor is yours, dude.
Yeah. Disclaimer: this happened years and years ago, when I was like my first job. Like this is a long time ago. And I this didn't like resonate with me until this year. But I don't know if anyone's read the book "The Governing Dynamics of Coaching" by James Smith, but he talks about a lot um, like efficacy in training, going from point A to point C when you're just trying to get to from point A to point B and you're adding this point Z and you're doing all this unnecessary stuff. And he talks about like strength and conditioning is the only domain where like we are unable to like quantitatively determine like this is worst practice and this is best. And whenever someone tries to say like this is better than this, which you can provide objective claims for and data and information like personal anecdotes or anecdotes from other people to prove that this is better than this. I don't know what it is about strength coaches, but like we take it personally and like they take it as a personal attack instead of like just striving for what is the most beneficial thing for the athlete. Like that's what I'm always trying to do is what is the best thing for the athlete, what's going to drive the adaptation, what's going to create a stress response, and what's going to get them better in my measurables and like what I'm tracking. So whether it's concentric impulse, weight on the bar, RSI, sprint speed, and a time 10 or a 10-yard fly, like if these things are going to get this athlete better at those metrics, those KPIs that I think are going to provide the most carryover, and I know that, weight rooms general, like I'm a believer in that. So insofar as what I can do to help their sport performance, if I can find something that's better than this, yeah, I'm going to defend it. And because I think of how new our field is, as far as like things are changing so fast and how novel everything is to the sporting world in general, like you have a lot of blue collar coaches who are old school that like you're bringing all this new stuff to the table and it's like information overload. Like we see this every day in our jobs, like the rate at which we're giving new information to people, they just can't consume it all. And it's like, it's too much and they end up like just pushing you away and they don't want to hear about it sometimes. So like that just goes to show how new this profession is and how fast the information is coming out. So with all that happening, everyone has FOMO, like this fear of missing out. And like you see, that's why you see the newest thing. And it's like, you have to be doing that. It's like, there's no principles anymore. And it's all just like what's hot right now and what is this person doing that's at this level. I need to mimic that person. So yeah, I took that a little personally, like, and also with performance reviews, like these things dictate raises and
Yeah. Yeah.
they are going to purposely not give you certain scores so that you don't earn the raise if someone else that's been in the job 5 6 years longer than you is more worthy of the raise. Like at that point, just say that they deserve it more because they've been here longer. Like I would understand that better as opposed to you lying to me and saying that like I'm not an empathic person, which I feel like I really am. Like I really do listen to opinions and I really think that I'm true to that. So yeah, that was an experience that I had where I was way too emotionally and professionally immature to give a response because I was on my way out of that job. So I really should have been a little bit more abrasive, I feel like, and like kind of speak my mind because I really wasn't thinking back, I wasn't really true to who I was when that conversation took place. So if that happened now, I think just what I've learned professionally is like I think I would have given a bit of a more abrasive rebuttal to that. But
What would you say now? So if I was giving you a review and I said you're not empathetic enough, what would you say now?
well, I probably wouldn't personally attack you, but I would probably go into the fact that like, look, I'm just striving for what's best. Like,
Yeah.
if it works for you, that's great. Like, and we all have these different contexts where we look at things and like our lens is going to dictate how we want to apply certain information. Like, people talk about books like Triphasic or like the system, like all those books. And it's like you can take principles from those books, but you don't have to run the whole system. So like when I kind of ridicule a system, like people associate a system with like their coaching identity. And like that's a problem in itself because that's just not how it should work. Like you should be applying the model to your athletes or like fitting the model to them instead of like having them fit the model. And that kind of boils down my training approach too, like with exercise selection and stuff like that. Like people say like, oh, what's better, like a trap bar dead or a squat or this or that, unilateral, bilateral. And I'm like, we're going to do a mix of everything, but I'm also
Yeah.
going to strive to give the athlete a little bit of comfort. Like it's kind of self-explanatory. You don't need a movement screen or like some kind of elaborate testing battery to know that an athlete that has long limbs shouldn't be like back squatting on flat ground. Maybe they need a heel wedge. Like, and we're going to talk about watching athletes, but I'm always striving to fit everything to them instead of the other way around. So, yeah, that's what I would say more or less.
Yeah, I've been told I'm not very empathetic before too. I have a funny story. So one of the volleyball coaches that I worked for previously several years ago, when he came in, he said he wanted to like test the athletes, the volleyball players' rotational power. And everyone who follows me knows what I think about rotational power. I'm not going to get into it right now.
Yeah.
And I knew where the coach was like eventually going to get to, and I kind of led him there, and I said, well, do you want to test this performance metric because you want to know how well they can like hit a volleyball because that involves like spinal rotation, rotation of the shoulder. It's like this whole body is twisting. And he said, yeah, that's why I want to test this quality. And I was like, why don't you just like test how hard they can hit a volleyball with a radar gun? Like that, can't that be your test? And he wanted a different test to test the same quality. He wanted to use like some sort of medicine ball throw or like a cable rotation swing chop down thing. And I'm like, you're just adding complicated steps to this and we don't need to do it. And it's just like I've been told I'm not very empathetic because I want to cut through that bullshit and just like get to things that are true and things that are real and accurate. So I've been there before too. Um, yeah, yeah. We don't need to get into it. But that was just my story. All right, next thing I want to talk to you about is fatigue monitoring. So you had a post. I guess I don't have the date on this, but you talked about how using a force plate, and like I said, it's obvious after you read your post. It's like so obvious, but I don't think many people grasp this. I actually wouldn't have grasped this if I hadn't have read your post. But you talked about how like time to take off in a jump and stiffness is way more important than jump height because good athletes are going to find a way to jump high and then they can kind of like cheat the test. And this is assuming that an athlete, if you're doing fatigue monitoring, assuming that the athlete is performing the jump test on the force plate with high effort, they're going to jump high regardless of how they get there. So I just want to have you elaborate on that too, because again, like it's obvious once I hear you talk about it. I don't work in college athletics anymore, but when I did, I didn't have access to force plates like you did. We just had a jump mat, and I remember the good athletes they always did jump higher on the jump mat anyways, and it was like, why am I testing this jump height daily when I'm not getting
Yeah,
any useful data out of it? So yeah, again,
yeah.
go ahead and just talk about that.
Yeah, I think disclaimer with the force plates that like for anybody who doesn't know, force plate, jump height, and all these things are calculated on algorithms. Like it's a impulse equation, factors in your body weight. So that's number one. With the jump mats, it's flight time. So like you can land with bent knees, it'll say you jumped higher. Um, so you can cheat a jump mat, but you can't really cheat a force plate. But you'll if you look at other metrics, you will see what's changing for them to achieve those force outputs. So like the reason vertical jump is not a good indicator of fatigue is because if an athlete goes lower in their counter movement, if they do a deeper counter movement depth, and I look at counter movement depth over time too, they will go lower to use a greater surface area of muscle to produce that force. So like the greater range of motion, the more time they have to produce that high force. So what they're doing is they're shortening they're broadening the time window they have to produce the force. So what you'll see is you're going to see RSI tank, you're going to see time to take off tank, as in it's not going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to get slower. So a longer time to take
Yeah.
off. You're going to see stiffness tank, um, and you're going to see counter movement depth tank. So ideally in a perfect world, when they're fresh, they're going to produce the same jump height and impulse, or even better. But all the other like time factors are going to stay high. So like they're gonna get their jump off fast. The RSI is going to be high. The stiffness is going to be high. The counter movement depth is not going to be as deep. It's going to be a little more shallow.
Hey,
And
cut you off. Stiffness.
yeah,
What force plates do you have? You have Hawken Dynamics?
talking. Yeah,
Do they have a stiffness metric on there?
it is literally called stiffness. Yeah,
What exactly is that?
I believe I think it's newtons divided by seconds, I believe. I can,
Isn't that the same as just RFD?
I, I believe so. So like
Okay.
RFD and stiffness move the same. I think that stiffness though adjusts for body weight too. I think it's relative. Breaking RFD and stiffness do kind of change together a little bit. RFD will definitely become a little lower, but stiffness I think is a relative quality. Body weight, I'd have to double check on that. But those two metrics do fluctuate kind of in tandem. And I actually just made a recent discovery that I think is pretty valuable, like qualitatively speaking. And I don't know if it's like legit or not, but I'm going to track it long term. So what I've found is RSI and time to takeoff have an inverse relationship. So when RSI is high, time to takeoff is very low and fast. So I basically I plotted a chart of all of our jumps so far on a team average of these two lines moving, and you'll see like if this is RSI right here and this is time to take off, the lines kind of move like this. So they create like an area under the curve, and this is just speculation. I have to look more into it, like I said, but if RSI is up and time to take off is down and fast, you can assume the team is fresher than they are on average. Like they're pretty recovered and they're pretty ready to perform at a high level. My theory is that the larger that area under the RSI curve is, the fresher they are, and the closer to peak performance they are. Inversely, if time to take off is super high and slow, and RSI is really slow and down, then they're super fatigued. So like we've got windows of that graph that I've looked at where like, okay, we started team practice this week and it's a massive separation. Like time to take off is real slow, RSI is real down because the workload. I mean, you know the Cara hours for college sports. You go from 8 hours a week individuals, and then you move into 20-hour weeks. So it's a crap ton of workload you're adding on. So
Are you
during
softball
that
and
week,
baseball?
softball and women's golf.
Okay, but not baseball. Okay.
Softball, women's golf. Yeah, our baseball strength coach is my director. He's got men's golf, so I'm like the opposite of him. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna look at that longer term. So like maybe you could measure over time like how effective your like high low planning is, or just how effective your stress allocation is. I don't know. It's just a theory I'm gonna look into, but yeah, don't ever use jump height as a readiness tool because it's not indicative of like how fast the nervous system's firing, which is the number one indicator. So
Yeah. And a lot of people just default to that, including myself back in the day.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
One more thing I'll add. Not sorry to cut you off, but like
no.
see these coaches on Instagram posting like the vertical jump results on their jump testing, and I'm like, there's no way this athlete is having a linear, like consistent, like or even exponential increase in jump height over like an 8 week span. Like you're telling me that there wasn't a single day they were under recover. Like that's
Yeah.
just that's just inhumane. Like that you don't hear that. Like if you're testing people on a force plate, you're never gonna have linear increase. You're always gonna see fluctuation because you can't cheat those plates, but you can. People learn fast how to cheat the jump mat. It's real easy to cheat it. So
Side note, how long have you had the Hawken Dynamics?
I started using Hawken when I got to OU, but when I was with the Royals, I used Vald. But Vald,
Okay.
I never looked at the raw force time curves when I was with the Royals. We kind of just looked at a couple different metrics, and that was it. But I've done a super deep dive into force plates this year, and I've even like individualized some like different plyometric protocols and jumping protocols based on the curves. We could talk about that too if you'd like, but
Yeah. Well, no, because now I'm with the kinesiology department at UND, and so I do have access to a force plate, but we have Vertec, if you're familiar with Vertec, and they changed their software, so I'm trying to figure out how to analyze it because they just give you like raw data, and so I have to plug in the algorithms or the equations, right, to spit it out. So I'm gonna try to get the kinesiology department to either get Hawken or Vald. Those are the two that I feel like have gotten
I
the
love
best
Hawken.
feedback.
Yeah, I love Hawken. Hawken's awesome.
Yeah.
Vald is really good too, but I think Hawken's a little easier to use. I think, in my opinion.
Mhm.
One,
Okay.
if I could go
Yeah,
into
go
like
ahead. Go ahead, dude.
really quick the just the specifications that I use, and I got this from Daniel Bove. He's the strength coach with the New Orleans Pelicans. I read his book, The Quadrant System, and then I read Takeoff, which is like his force plate, his force plate instructions, and like how he kind of does diagnostics on there. But you'll really see four distinct different patterns on the force plates. If you look at the raw curve, you'll see bimodal, which is like the peak comes up and then it kind of plateaus and then rebounds again and comes back down. So like when the athlete gets to force at zero velocity at the bottom of their counter movement, there's a break in that curve. So they're dissipating some of that eccentric force and they're not loading it properly, and they're expending it and they're not redirecting it into their propulsive phase of the jump. And you've got like an early and late peak with that. So early means like the first peak is higher than the second. Late peak is the second peak is higher. Then you got unimodal curves where it's more of a continuous arc. Those athletes are your bouncier, more elastic. You could say fascial driven. I don't really know what my stance is on fascia. I don't really want to get into that, but they're like your bouncier, like more explosive athletes who you use their tendons to drive a lot more of the movement. So you'll see more of a smooth unimodal curve with them. And then you'll see athletes who have a really long, drawn out eccentric duration where the eccentric peak, it doesn't even look like a peak. It's like a slow, like, it looks like a slow, like gradual progression instead of like a sharp eccentric peak. And every young athlete, every freshman I've ever had shows the slow peak. Like they just don't have eccentric strength. But we know this, right? Like this is one thing with force plates too is sometimes they confirm what you already know. Like they're not, you don't
Yeah,
need
that's what I
all
was
these,
going to ask you about next. Yeah.
yeah, you don't need all these crazy tests. And like this is another thing that goes back to my philosophy as a whole is like you don't need to do a whole bunch of screens. You need to watch your athletes and you need to just use criterion and heuristics to know where they're at. So like freshman athlete that doesn't have a training base, like they probably have the training age of a freshman or sophomore in high school. Like they're no different than them.
Yeah.
So just because I'm at a Power Five university in the SEC doesn't mean that they're more skilled than someone who's at a mid major. Just does not mean the same thing. I get phone calls all the time. People are asking me what I'm doing here, and it's like, dude, probably not much different than you. Like, and people are just surprised by that. And I think that's another issue with our profession is like, even with the Royals, like we had kids coming in from the draft who
18
just
years
couldn't
old.
like yeah from either drafted out of high school or like some kids from college. Yeah, the college athletes that were drafted out of college were pretty good, but like the high school kids, like they don't know how to do anything. So like the level you're at doesn't mean that they're just more advanced. But so like with the force play stuff and just seeing these curves with all these young athletes and the lack of eccentric force and the lack of the ability to like bear that load, like I can tell that just by watching them do a box jump. How fast is their counter movement? Are they springy off the ground? Like you don't need these elaborate things to be able to make the right decision for the athletes. But it does confirm what I feel is appropriate. And that feels good from a programming standpoint because I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. And over time, I'm seeing this eccentric rate of force development become more and more steep. And they're getting stronger and they're handling that load better. So like this just circles back to watching your athletes and really studying the body language and studying the movement. And again, I don't think you need all these elaborate things to be able to tell what's going on.
So I want to ask you about the dynamic strength index. So I think the dynamic strength index is mostly bullshit. Like I don't think it really like provides much useful value at all. And I think you were kind of getting there just a minute ago. Do you want to elaborate on that? I mean, you
Yeah,
talked about how
well,
like you can have an athlete perform these tests and have this huge ratio of their peak force and then their dynamic force. And then it's like, yeah, well, I already know that. Like this test didn't give me any actionable data. Like I'm just going to keep training him the way I was training him anyways.
yeah, I've done the DSI myself 3 times in the last couple months, and like I'm getting faster, I'm jumping higher, my RSI is getting better, but like I'm not training the way that it's telling me to train.
Yeah,
Like
I would
a,
totally ignore it. Like I've done it.
a
I've done
good
it before myself. Um, yeah, I've done it before myself. I've tested, and I have like this huge gap between like my peak force and then my dynamic strength. So according to the dynamic strength index, I'm like deficient in rate of force development. But it's like I'm 5'10", 230. I can dunk a basketball. Like I'm not deficient in rate of force development. This
yeah.
ratio kind of is meaningless.
Yeah, the
Thing.
thing it told me was I'm not strong enough, and I hit a triple at 2 times body weight yesterday on back squats, and like my concentric impulse is like 580, which is like really good, and like I'm jumping 65 centimeters on Hawken, like that's pretty, that's getting up there. Like I'm not weak, Like I
Yeah.
think if anything, I lack like elasticity. Like when I get to max V, like my max V comparatively speaking to my acceleration is not there. Like my acceleration, I the other day on the track I hit a 141 10-yard acceleration. Like I say that's pretty damn good. Um, but max V, like I haven't broken 22 miles an hour yet. I'm really close, but I haven't broken that. I think that would be the next step. But it's telling me to just keep hammering strength, and I'm like, no, like this is not what I need. And the other issue with DSI for athletes, like the practical application for athletes, in my case, is like my athletes are in season all year long, fall season, and then we only have a couple weeks where they're not in season, but that's finals time where we like my hours go down and we move into voluntary sessions only. And my golfers are the same. My golfers can get away with general strength all year long, and I wouldn't have to worry about it because that's just their training age. So I mean, we do jump and we do power stuff, but like I can basically squeeze out more general strength all year long for them. Like I would never have to worry about like switching it up too much for them or getting too specific. Like there's no thought process with that stuff with them at all. But point being with them in season all year long, like it's really hard to like intentionally try to functionally overreach somebody or deliver a stimulus that's so profound to move a quality that they're maybe deficient in to a level that like maybe you would do if you were out of season. Like you can't really afford to do that during the fall where you're practicing 20 hours a week, or even the spring where you're practicing and then you got 5 games over the weekend for tournament play in February. Like it's really hard to like really double down on those areas. And my take is like a really good program is going to encapsulate all those qualities anyway, like to appropriate doses. And then the other thing comes down to just my time available in the weight room. I've got 40 minutes usually in season. There's only so much I can do. And I'm a one-man show coaching 21 people at once. It's really hard to run like 8 different programs. Like it just is. Like I categorize people into different buckets, but after that, like it gets difficult. And again, talking about the training age, like the DSI is not applicable when the training age is practically insignificant. So
Yeah. The other thing I have with DSI is that like let's say you respect what the DSI is telling you. Um, Part of an athlete's success could be because of the deficiency in a certain quality and the
absolutely.
proficiency in another quality. So like if you change their training um to kind of change that relationship between those two qualities, you don't even know if you're helping the athlete anyways. They might be worse. So like
Yeah,
if someone
that's a
for
good
like to make it really simple, if someone is like more proficient in slow force compared to like fast force dominant, and now you want to try to change that makeup of them, they might be like a worse athlete after that. So yeah, I don't
yeah.
know. I have a lot of issues with all of these kinds of tests. I'm trying to keep track of the time here. So I want to get to the professionalism. I've professionalism the Pedulla way, because before we started talking, you were talking about professionalism kind of in this different framework than what's usually talked about. Like again, your most of your audience is younger coaches, interns, GAs, people trying to like make their way through the industry. Um, yeah, go just I'm giving you the floor. Go ahead and give me your talking points there.
Yeah. So I'm not boasting when I say this at all. I'm only 25 years old,
I was just gonna
and
ask you that, how old you are. You seem older than that.
I'm 25 years old. People say that all the time, and I take it as a compliment because I have always I've always striven to be professional, courteous. I really don't try to use any kind of swear language. Like I really put forth a good image of myself and my organization, whoever I'm with. Like I really make a good effort to do that stuff. And I cannot stress enough like how important it is to always be aware of like who's watching you. If you want a certain opportunity, like you need to be careful about what you're putting out there. Like I had a kid, I'm really good friends with this guy who's an intern right now at a college in Massachusetts. And I'm really good friends with him. I've known him for a long time. And he's on my training team and he's posting all these videos, but like he's got like explicit music in the background, like, I'm not going to go into the expletives, but like, hey, do me a favor. Like you want to work in a position like mine, like stop doing this stuff. You want me to share this stuff? Like, just stop putting that stuff out. And he's like, yeah, my director told me the same thing. I was like, you should probably listen because like you don't know who's watching you. And I can tell you right now, if I ever put stuff out there like that, and that was public on my page, and I was cursing at people online or using expletives in my captions, my staff would never have hired me. Never. And like, I'm not saying that you can't be who you are, like be who you want to be, but also like you might shut the door on certain opportunities that you want. That's just one thing. But like I do want to talk about a lot of strength coaches think, and rightfully so, through no fault of their own, when they're interviewing for a job, they're always like honed in and focused on performance and strength and conditioning. And I just want to remind people how replaceable we are. Like there are many people that could do just
So
as good a job
replaceable.
as we are. Yeah. So if that's true, you need to separate yourself with more than programming. And my staff now, they do value my programming for sure. But I think what makes me an asset here is that one, I make people's job really easy. Like I'm consistent. I don't bring problems to them that they don't need to know about. I don't burden them with things that they don't care about. Um, I stay quiet at practice. I watch practice. I don't interrupt. I do what I'm told promptly and on time. I get things done on time. I'm never late to work. Things like that. Like people need to think more about that stuff. Also, the ability to be approachable. Um, like respecting someone's opinion, like especially like I said before, like my head coach now has been doing this for a very, very, very long time. When I came into this job, the first thing I told myself was like, you're not going to change anything. Like you need to earn the respect first, do what you're tasked to do, and then you make small wins over time. So if you're interviewing for a job, you need to look at your employers as a consumer in the business market. Like when you sell things as a salesman, and we're both salesmen, Will, because we own businesses and we have to reach the consumer and speak to their needs, you need to think about what is the problem you're trying to solve. Like that is the number one thing with sales. What problem are you trying to solve? That's going to dictate the product, the delivery, the copywriting, all of that stuff. How you deliver your speech. Before I interviewed for OU, I watched like 15 interviews that Coach Gasso gave, and I learned what she valued before I sat down for the interview. And I spoke exactly to everything that she talked about in her language, her verbiage, but it was still true to me. Like I believed all those things, but it resonated, I felt, with my staff. Now, that might not be true to them. That's what I believe. And that's what's worked for me in the past. So, you need to do your homework on your employers, I think, is number one. But you also got to know your ground, like know where your feet are and know your role. Like you're not going to make this catastrophically large impact. You're going to be patient, earn respect, stay out of the way when your opinion is not asked for, and give solicited advice when asked for, and do your job exceptionally well. That's what I would tell people to do. There's so many things that like burden us and bother us about the performance industry, and like whether it's how hard practice is, or like whether it's, oh, I sent this text or email and it wasn't acknowledged or it wasn't considered. Like I'm trying to make a positive change for the athletes and it wasn't considered. Like you can bash your head against the wall all you want, but you're only making your life harder and you're only just going to make yourself miserable. So you got to focus on your area. And like you spoke a couple of weeks ago about like the coactive model, the four coactive model, how it's like it's nonsensical because like it's not going to be applied anyway. So like, yeah, it's good to know that stuff, but it's going to be a long time before people start caring about that stuff. So what does your market, when I say market, like your employers, what do they value? So try to speak to what they value and give them what they value. Like, what do they want to see? Can you replicate that and not kind of like save face and like not and be like an unauthentic version of yourself? You got to try to find ways to like authentically give them what they want. And I think that I've done a pretty good job of doing that. And that's what I'm trying to do all the time, is just do my job really well, let them coach their program, because like this is a dynasty that I'm working for. And like, you know, I don't believe, and I said this in my course, I do not believe that OU softball would have lost the national championship last year had I not been here. Like, I'm not the reason they won it. So, disclaimer there, like that's a big thing too. Like, they won because they're really skilled softball players and they practiced at a high level, and a host of other things that really can't be quantitatively determined. So, your
They won the
value is a lot
championship.
more. Say that again.
They won the World Series.
Yeah, yeah. Fourth year in a row. So like
Oh
what
wow.
last year was that last year was my first year. So this is my second year, but I didn't really accept a lot of credit for that. Like the World Series actually ended, and there was actually a brief moment where I was like, okay, what now? Like, I actually thought that for a second. And then I thought, like, did I do a good job? This and that. And then I boiled it down to like, well, okay, 100% of our starters were available for the game. Our entire roster was available for the games. Like, everybody contributed when their name was called. Like, that was a job well done. That's what I told myself. Like, we were available for competition. They were able to execute their skills at a high level. They were fresh for it. We managed load very, very well. And that's what I told myself was like the mark of a successful season. But like, it's really hard to, some people like knock themselves because the team was like losing games. Like, that's not always the mark that you're doing a bad job as a strength coach. Like, your carryover is very insignificant, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, dude, we have less than 2 minutes here. It's gonna kick us off, so I'm gonna do just a quick wrap up for you. Anyone who's still listening to this, awesome. Go follow Joe on Instagram. I appreciate you watching. Any final thoughts you got before we kind of close this?
No, I mean, if you're a strength coach out there and you watch this, I appreciate it. Keep working hard. I know it's tough for a lot of people, and you know, I just wish everybody well. Honestly, like it's a tough profession, but don't let things that you can't control get in your way. That's how I've kind of matured as a coach. Just dealing with what I know how to deal with well, and just striving for the best in my area, and not letting all this other stuff, all these other factors get in the way, because it'll drive you nuts, and it's not worth the pain. So
Just see it. That's what I say. Just see it. Just
yeah,
see it. Yep.
yeah.
All right, dude. Thanks, man.